Hello, sixth graders. I hope you are doing well today. Today is our last video. I'm going to miss doing these videos for you. Of course, I would rather be there and talk to you and hug you and fist bump you in real life, but know that I think of you all the time. When I do these videos, I actually do picture where every one of you is sitting, and I really wish I could see you, especially those of you who are not coming back. It just breaks my heart, but I hope that you will continue to keep in touch with me. If you want to do a Zoom meeting with your friends and me, or one-on-one, let's do that. I know that I've done it with Jacob. Emma's asked me about it, and I would love to spend time with you. I'm here and I'm stuck in the house, and so I am lonely at myself, but I know it's not the same. But even if you wanted just to get together and talk with your friends, let me know. I'll put you on Zoom and you guys can talk and be silly, and we don't have to talk about school stuff. We can talk about crazy stuff as long as it's proper, right? But know that I am going to even miss the emails. I wake up in the morning with those of you who have been doing your work, and I appreciate that. And I know that some people are still watching the videos, and hopefully you are watching them even if you're not sending in what you've learned. So today we're going to finish up the book today, but there's a lot of pages, so I'm going to kind of go over them as really quickly as possible. If you have time, you can read it later, but I'm not expecting you to read 20 pages right now. I am going to discuss pages 331. Oops, that's the end. I'll go backwards. That's 331, so it will actually be 324 to 331. A lot of pages, but I am just going to kind of end this lesson with a bang, and what we should take into consideration everything that we've learned this year, right? Because it all comes down to one particular thing, and that is Jesus Christ and what we've learned, and the religion that we've learned, and that we have the gospel, we have the truth, and we need to take that truth and believe in it. And I hope if you haven't learned anything this year, that you have learned that Jesus loves you and that he came on this earth to die for you, and you can trust in him and he will take you to heaven. Put your faith in Christ and not in your works, and not in your church, and not in your people, because people will disappoint you. Even your heroes will disappoint you. But Jesus will always be true and faithful. Things are going to happen in your life, and as you grow older, that you're not going to understand and you're not going to think is fair. Just remember, though, that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, forever, and he will take you through the trials. He does allow trials to happen to those that love him. You know, and remember the story of Job in the Bible, and Job had everything taken away from him, but he still remained faithful to Christ, and God blessed him in the end. I don't know why I suffer with pain all the time, or I had to have cancer, or I have this disability, but I'm trusting that this is what God has for my life. And it's not always easy, and I do give myself pity parties once in a while, but then again, I also know that in heaven, I'm going to be perfect, and I'm not going to have any problems then, okay? Well, today's lesson is for May the 15th, and my shout out is going to go to all my boys. I'm going to miss every one of you from, and I'm not even going to try to say your names, because I know I will miss names. I will try. So I'm trying to think of where y'all are sitting, but I know that if I tried to attempt your names right now, that it would get messed up. And I also want to wish Nolan a happy birthday next week. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nolan. Happy birthday to you, because you won't get a birthday message next week. And then also, those of you that have summer birthdays, I wish you a happy birthday, and we will celebrate it when school comes back, okay? All right, so let's go really, really quickly and talk about the different types of religion and how the gospel was spread. On your first page, you have a man by the name of Athanasius. Okay, he was an important Christian leader in the early church in Egypt. He defended the deity of Christ against the false teachers. I'm just reading this little section. Who believed that Jesus was not equal with God the Father. Sometimes the Roman emperors sided with these false teachers. Persecuted for his beliefs, he had to hide in the Egyptian desert, sometimes for years, to carry on his fight for truth. In Egypt, a lot of them are Muslim there. They believe in, the Islamic faith, so and believe in Muhammad. He probably felt as if he were the only one standing for truth, with the whole world opposed to him. But in the end, true Christians embraced the right teaching that he had spent his life defending. A lot of times when we stand up for what's right, we feel like we're the only ones doing it, and it's embarrassing and it's scary. Those of you that are going to different schools and you're not going to be in a Christian school, it's going to be hard to profess faith and to stand up for Christ when you're the only one there. You don't have teachers teaching with a biblical worldview. You may have Christian teachers, but they're not allowed to talk about it. I remember talking to my friend the other day, and I was saying something about telling my students about Christ or something, and he goes, "Wait, are you allowed to do that?" And he didn't realize that I was teaching in a Christian school, and so that's something that that I am so thankful that I get to do. Okay, so why do you think the deity of Christ is an important issue? Well, the deity of Christ believes that he is God, right? He's God's son, he is God. But if we didn't believe it, if it wasn't an important issue, then Jesus is not fully God and not fully human. So his death was not worth dying because he couldn't, right? So the deity of Christ is very important. A lot of times, like I said, with this man not feeling like he stood alone, he actually stood alone, but yet people became Christians because of his example. Okay? Why do you think Jesus took a human body? Because he loves people, and he wanted to come to save us, right? But he wanted to experience what it was like to be human. He did everything. He ate, he drank, he slept, he was sad, he got angry. The only thing he didn't do was sin, right? And so that was important. How did Muslims restrict the lives of Egyptian Christians? They seized their church property and they threatened their life, and they threatened Christians. And also Muslims, depending on what sect you believed in, if you were like Sunni or if you were Shiite or whatever, they even turn against each other too. How do we know that Egypt will again be blessed by God? It's in Isaiah 19:25. So that was the page. Then on the, let's go to Greece, Rome, and Europe. Okay, Martin Luther was a pope, or a man who was studying to be a pope. He had converted to Christ. He got struck by lightning. And when he got struck by lightning, you had that near-death experience. And so he thought he wanted to convert to Christianity or give himself to the Bible and to study God and become a priest. And so while he was there, he started reading the Bible himself. And he got to a verse in the Bible that said, "For by grace are you saved through faith, not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." And he was thinking, okay, you're saved by grace. You're saved by grace, not of works. You're saved by grace. And he started thinking about that and everything that he was learning. And then he was like, wait a second. This is against my teaching. This is against what my teachers are telling me. And he started reading the Bible for himself. So if you look on page 326 and follow along as I read this, he was a leader of the Reformation. Okay? He was pursuing a law degree when he encountered a terrible storm. He promised that he would become a monk if he survived. About 6 weeks later, he entered a German monastery where they go, and learn how to be a priest. While studying the Bible as a monk, Martin Luther discovered that no amount of good works could justify a sinner before God. Luther's teaching on justification only by faith began the Reformation in Europe. He is known for his writings, especially for his 95 Theses. These theses helped spark the Protestant Reformation. He also wrote hymns and translated the Bible into German. So he wrote these 95 points on why the Roman Catholic Church was wrong and their teachings were wrong, and nailed it to the church doors so people could go and see it and read it. And do you think they made those people angry? Yes, of course. But he started something different. He started spreading the gospel, and people who followed him were called Lutherans. Now, a lot of people who followed him ended up being burnt at the stake. He wasn't killed for his beliefs, but later on, they excommunicated him, which being excommunicated from the church means that you're no longer going to go to heaven in their belief. But they dug up his bones years later and burnt his bones, thinking, okay, we couldn't burn him on the stake, but now we're going to burn his bones, which really didn't matter because he was in heaven, and just being thankful that God had showed him the truth. Okay, and that's then you have so he was influential in Europe and Germany and all those other places. And then also you have a man by the name of William Carey. He was a British missionary to India, and he began missionary work there in 1792. He trained Indian pastors and evangelists. Okay, so there's and it's so cool when you read about people who will give their lives to another country. Now, I know that living in America, we have a lot of comfort and things that some other countries don't have. Now, if I was to go and be a missionary to maybe China or Japan, and I was in the city, I would still have the modern technologies that they have today. When I was in college, one of the president of the college, his daughter ended up being a missionary to Papua New Guinea. Okay, so they were actually in the jungles of New Guinea without modern technology. She was a nurse, and so when she left for 4 years, she was saying goodbye to her family, saying goodbye. So there was no Skype, there was no FaceTime, there was no email, there was no texting, there was nothing, no form of communication for her when she was there. So that's giving up. And so when William Carey left his country to go to India, it was the same thing. He literally had to give up everything to go into that country and to spread the gospel and learn the language. And that takes real faith. That takes love. And he sparked something, okay? One of the things that I wanted to talk about is that the Roman Catholic Church taught that although Christ had forgiven sins through his death on the cross, people still did need to do acts of penance to clear their souls when they sinned. It taught that some people died with uncleansed sin would go to purgatory for a while. So not necessarily hell, but kind of like a waiting room, okay? While others had done more good than they needed to get to heaven. Indulgences were supposed to take advantage of this reserve of good deeds. By buying an indulgence, a person can get someone out of purgatory sooner or be relieved of the need to do penance himself. So say I had a sister, I believed that she was in purgatory. I could go and give money to the church and buy these indulgences so that she can get out. It's just a way of ripping people off, right? It's not true. And so people would spend their hard-earned money to get their loved ones out of purgatory. Martin Luther became concerned about this issue when a church leader named Brandenburg, who was clearly using the sale of indulgences to make money, insisted that indulgences could forgive sin. Luther had come to the conclusion that forgiveness of sin was a free gift of God, and it was received through a person's faith. It could not be bought or earned by one's own good works. So he put together a list of issues for debate, and this was his 95 Theses. Okay, so I was going to ask you a question about William Carey. How did the arrival of Roman Catholic priests cause confusion among Indian believers? Okay, the priests tried to force Indian Christians to follow the Catholic traditions. According to the tradition, who first brought the gospel to India was actually the disciple Thomas. He did. And then we talked about Pantaeus, find when he first arrived in India. He found Christians with copies of the Gospel of Matthew. What connection formed between Christians in India and Persia? The Indians sent their church leaders to Persian schools. That's what they believe in, okay? And why did trading companies forbid evangelism by Protestant missionaries? They thought the missionaries would upset the Hindus and hinder trade. And why did missionaries go to India anyway? They chose to obey God rather than people, right? Okay, so why do you think it is important for a missionary, first of all, to learn the native language of where they're going? So if I'm going to India, why is it important that I learn how to speak their language? Or China, or it's because it's easier to spread the gospel, right? And so that's something that's very, very important. You're able to do that. William Carey, he lived like he was in India. He dressed like he was in India. He didn't dress like he was from another country. He tried to do his best to fit in with their tradition, okay? And then why is it important for them? Then, if you have a saved convert, why is it important to teach those people to spread the gospel themselves? Well, if they do that, they can better reach their own people for Christ, right? What helped the missionary work in India? England passed a law that required the British East India Company to permit missionary work. And what do you think is the status of India today? There are millions of Christians in India today, but it's only a small population because of the Hindu religion, and sometimes they experience persecution. Okay, so that was page 327. We're going to talk a little bit, oops, wrong page, Latin America and the people, Robert Morrison. Just read a little bit about him. Robert Morrison was one of the first English missionaries to China. Once in China, his main focus was his translation work. Some of his first translations were tracts in the Chinese language. He remained in China for 27 years, long enough to publish a translation of the Bible. Morrison had only 10 converts to Christianity, but they remained faithful to the faith. So 27 years he stayed in this country, and he only had 10 people saved. I would probably get discouraged. I would be like, God, why am I here? But you know, sometimes you just plant that seed. You never know when that seed's going to grow. So he stayed there and he planted seeds, and these converts were able to spread the gospel. Morrison's most famous convert was Liang Fei, a man who became China's first Chinese evangelist. Okay, the Spanish is one more Spanish is one of more than 600 languages that have a complete copy of the Bible thanks to the work of Bible translators. Why do you think it's vital for people to have a Bible in their own language? So they can read it, right? They don't have to depend on anything else. Why was Roman Catholicism dominant in the Mesoamerica? Remember, this is just the Spaniards from Spain brought Catholicism to this area, and they wanted to keep it strong. And what land from Mexico through South America became known as Latin America? Okay. When did the first missionaries from Switzerland first try to go to Latin America? And what happened? They tried to go in the 1500s, but they were driven out by the French. Okay. And when did Protestant missionaries have more access in going to Latin America? When the Spanish and Portuguese started ruling in the 1800s, Latin American nations became more important or open to missionaries. What change did immigrants from Europe and the United States make to share the gospel more effectively in Latin America? They learned Spanish, they learned Portuguese because Brazil's there, right? And they learned these languages instead of their native language. All right, and they used it. They used it. And then who distributed Bibles in the national languages of the people? The British Bible Society and the American Bible Society. And what gradual change took place in churches planted in Latin America? The leadership of the churches shifted from missionaries to the Latin Americans. All right, so we're almost finished. Here we go. Hudson Taylor is another missionary. Follow along as I read this little excerpt about him. He desired to take the gospel to the interior of China. He began to pray for laborers. At first he prayed for 24, then for 70 more, then for 100 more, then for 1,000 more. God answered his prayers by multitudes of Chinese people coming to faith in Christ. Many of the new converts worked closely with Hudson Taylor's China Inland Missions. He insisted, however, that the workers support themselves rather than be paid by foreign funds. This way, the Chinese church could stand on its own even if the foreigners were driven out. And that was something that he was important to. So we have those two men. What two events in Chinese history showed the wisdom of Taylor's requirement? The Boxer Rebellion and the Communist takeover. So the Boxer Rebellion was a time when Chinese locals or an army were killing Christians and killing outsiders. So if you did not belong in China, you were sent. So if you were in England and you were on a business trip or something, you could end up losing your life. So a lot of Christians were sent out, and this is, you'll learn this more in world history. We'll discuss this a little bit more, but they were sent out. And then later on, the communists, after World War II, the communist government took over, and communism suppresses Christianity. It requires you to worship the government or the government or the system that they have, and so God and religion is not okay, and we don't have it anymore. And so a lot of people died being Christians in the communist regime. All right, so look at, it says, okay, that's not where I want to go. What does the enemy do to the man who sows good seed in this field? Oh, you know what? That's not what I want to read. Sorry. Oops, there goes my book. Why was Japan difficult to reach with Christianity? It was closed by outside influences, and it also had, you remember, their religion, Shintoism and Buddhism, held away over its people. What happened to open Japan to American missionaries in the mid-1800s? A trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan. And then they were allowed to go to certain ports, and then missionaries came in pretending that they were there to sell things. How has the spread of Christianity in Japan been different from the spread in China? It has been a little bit slower because the Japanese believers are very small in population. Okay, so that, my friends, is the end of the book. I know we covered a lot today, and I covered a few missionaries. Go back and read it if you're interested in some of these missionaries. Google them or read biographies about them. It's very interesting what these people did and how they spread the gospel. I am going to miss you, talking to you. Even though this is not, live, I still feel that I can communicate with you guys and know that I love you no matter what. You guys matter, and I tell you guys to make good choices all the time. But even if you didn't make good choices, I'm still gonna love you no matter what. And I think you're all great. Those of you that are leaving next year and won't be back, just always remember that you have a teacher at Legacy who loves you, and I'll think of you and I'll pray for you. And those of you that are coming back, I'm so excited that I get to be your teacher again, Lord willing. Hopefully we will be able to have school and I won't have to do these videos anymore. But at least we have them. If I'm sick at school, I could just send them and say, here, watch this for the day. And they won't even have to pay a sub, right? And then your names are going to be there for all eternity. So just know that I do care about you. I love you very much, every one of you, and I hope you make good choices.